Welcome to the Full Nielsen. Today I'm going to be doing a comparison between the SIG Cross, the Christensen Arms Modern Precision Rifle, and the Springfield Waypoint 2020. All of these rifles are chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. The Christensen Arms and the Springfield Armory both have 22-inch barrels, and the SIG Cross has an 18-inch barrel. Also, these two barrels are carbon wrapped or carbon sleeved, however you want to describe it. It's a steel core with a carbon fiber wrap or sleeve over the top of that core to add rigidity. The Christensen Arms is just a standard steel barrel. I'm going to start off with the accuracy, and this is based off of my experience with these guns. I know other people may have different experiences with these guns, better or worse accuracy than what I'm going to describe. To give you background about accuracy, or something that is an important caveat with the accuracy I'm going to describe, I hand load all of my ammunition. And that usually allows me to seat the bullets a little bit longer. And doing that usually makes it to where they're closer the rounds are closer to being jammed into the rifling or very close to the rifling. And I usually find that that nets me a pretty significant increase in accuracy over factory loaded ammunition. So my experience with the SIG Cross is I believe it's around a 3/4 to about an 1.25 inch MOA gun, depending on the type of ammunition you're using or loading in this particular case, because I'm using hand loads. My brother has one as well. He'd say probably pretty consistently around a 1 MOA gun. He's had groups that were 3/4 MOA. Anyway, so that's the accuracy you can expect out of this particular rifle if you're using hand loads. Now, my brother shot some factory ammunition out of it, and he said even with factory ammunition, he was still able to get around 1-inch groups. So anyway, with these two rifles here, I found the performance on them to be very similar in terms of accuracy, and I would say they're both half MOA to 1 MOA rifles. For me, with my particular hand loads, I would say I'm usually able to pretty consistently shoot around 3/4 MOA groups. I think they're capable of more than that, but once I start getting tighter than that, I think that has more to do with me than it does the rifle in terms of the sheer accuracy capability. So 3/4 MOA consistently with my hand loads, but I've seen groups as tight as half MOA and as large as 1 MOA depending on the load. Now, weight. The weight on these rifles. This is something that's pretty hard to find for these because there's different specs for some of these rifles, especially for the Christensen Arms. Christensen Arms does a pretty shoddy job of explaining what the weight is going to be for different barrel lengths. In fact, I think it's kind of, I don't know that I'd say false advertising, maybe that strong of a word, but pretty silly the way they do it, because when they list the weight ranges, sometimes they would list the lower end of the weight range depending on the rifle you're looking at. You don't realize, oh, that's for a 308 with a 16-inch barrel, not a 6.5 Creedmoor with a 22-inch barrel, or not a long action with this barrel. And they don't have it broken down very well on their website in terms of the weights for different barrel lengths or long action versus short action. So be aware of that when you're shopping for these. This rifle with the 22-inch barrel weighs, I believe, just under 8 pounds. So I want to say it's like 7 pounds, 12 ounces, something like that, with no magazine and no optic on it. Now, these other two rifles are more like 6 pounds, 9 ounces. So the Christensen Arms, at least in this particular configuration, is substantially heavier than both of these other rifles by a little bit more than a pound. If you went with a 16-inch barreled Christensen Arms, or something in that length that would be closer to what you'd be looking at with the SIG Cross, I suspect that weight would be a lot closer between those rifles. But anyway, so the Springfield and the SIG Cross, 6 pounds, 9 ounces, around that territory. The Christensen Arms is like 7 pounds, 12 to 14 ounces. Now, adjustability. When I'm talking about adjustability, I'm talking about the ability to make the rifle fit you, which means adjustable length of pull, adjustable cheek piece. As you can see with this rifle, it does not have an adjustable cheek piece or adjustable length of pull. That is a feature that you can add. At least you can add the adjustable cheek piece portion, but you can't get an adjustable length of pull that I've seen with these particular rifles. The adjustable cheek piece adds a significant amount of weight to this rifle. I want to say it's like 9 ounces, so a half a pound or something to the back end of this rifle. When I say significant, I mean significant if you're trying to use this as a lightweight packable hunting gun. Anyway, so that's the reason I did not go for that model, between the additional cost and the additional weight, I was not interested in that. So adjustability wise, if I had to rate them on which ones have the most adjustability, I would say by far the SIG Cross has, well, it has the most adjustability in that when you look at the back end here, you can adjust the cheek piece and the length of pull. You can do the same on the Christensen arms, but one of the things you can do with the Springfield or the SIG Cross is you can also adjust this butt pad up or down, the height of this. That is not something that you can do on the Christensen arms. Anyway, so I would say the SIG Cross is number one in terms of adjustability, not only because it has that additional adjustment that you're missing on the Christensen arms, but also all of its adjustments are toolless. And so if you have a group of shooters of different shapes and sizes, you can just adjust this on the fly while they're sitting at the bench very easily to fit them. And the adjustments on the Christensen arms are, you're using an Allen key, setting those, and pretty much going to leave them alone. It's not something you're going to want to adjust a whole bunch on because it's not easy to adjust on the fly. So adjustability, SIG Cross number one, the MPR is number two, and then the Springfield Waypoint, even if you get the model with the adjustable cheek piece, it still doesn't have adjustable length of pull, non-folding, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have the same adjustability of those other two rifles. Now I want to move on to factory trigger. In terms of factory triggers, the Christensen Arms has the best factory trigger of these three rifles. It comes with a Trigger Tech Special trigger with a flat-faced trigger. So it can be adjusted to a lighter trigger pull than any of these other rifles. And I also personally prefer the flat-face trigger. That may vary from person to person, but nevertheless, lighter trigger pull, more expensive trigger from Trigger Tech than what you find in the Springfield Waypoint. And the Springfield Waypoint, I would say, is probably number two. It also comes with the Trigger Tech trigger, but it's a curved trigger. The main difference between the two of these is this comes with, I believe, the field trigger, and this comes with the special trigger, which is a couple tiers above the standard field trigger, and it can be reduced down to, I want to say, 1.5 pounds. Standard trigger, I believe, is 2 pounds is the lowest, and then the field trigger, I think, is 2.5. So this trigger can't be adjusted down to quite as light of a pull as the Christensen Arms. I like that lighter weight. In fact, that's usually where I like my triggers, is around 1.5 pounds for a precision type rifle. Even for hunting rifles like that, I know people say it's too light for a hunting rifle. It depends on how you hunt. If you're smashing through a bunch of brush and you've got a round in the chamber and safety off and all that, that's probably not safe to be doing that really with a round in the chamber period, no matter how heavy or light your trigger is. But I would generally carry these with no round in the chamber, and then when you get into a position where you find the game that you're pursuing, then you can go ahead and chamber around and all that kind of stuff and not have to worry about dropping the rifle or snagging it on something with a really lightweight trigger. So just depends on your hunting style and how you're using them. But this has the best trigger. I would say this is number two. And the SIG, I would say, is number three. I think pull weight wise, the SIG Cross and this Trigger Tech trigger, field trigger, are pretty similar, around 2.5 pounds. This is a two-stage trigger. Both of these triggers in the Christensen Arms and the Springfield Army are single stage. For those of you who don't know what that is, two-stage trigger has a little bit of take-up before you hit a wall, and then when you apply additional pressure on that wall, the trigger breaks. Single-stage triggers, you're at the wall, and they just break. Trigger Tech triggers are the best in the business as far as I'm concerned. They have zero creep. There's no rolling break of any kind. And most other triggers that I've used kind of feel that like they have this little bit of a rolling break. And the SIG Cross, in comparison to these two, feels that way. That when you hit that wall and then you pull past that wall, it almost feels like it kind of rolls off the wall instead of breaking like a glass rod, at least when you compare it to the best in the business. I still think that the SIG trigger is a phenomenal trigger. The main takeaway for me in triggers, even though I've ranked them, the way that I have, is none of these triggers are triggers that I would be going out and searching for an aftermarket trigger. They're all very high quality triggers from the factory, so be aware of that. Now, action. The actions on these rifles. Both the Christensen Arms and this Springfield Waypoint, these two rifles here, have a two-lug design. They're basically based off of a Model 700 type designed action, or clones of a Model 700 in my opinion. And so that's the action type that these have, just a standard 2-lug design with a 90-degree bolt throw. 90-degree bolt throw means how far, or bolt lift, how far you have to lift the bolt in order to open the action. The SIG Cross has a tri-lug design, and it has a shorter throw, 60 degrees, I believe. And so as far as the way I would describe these actions, or what I like and don't like about them, and the way I would rank them, the Springfield Armory 2020 has by far the smoothest action of these three. It feels like a custom action. If you've ever handled a custom action, they are just buttery smooth. It's like the bolt is sliding back and forth on ball bearings. It's just a phenomenally smooth action. Good tolerances. It's not super sloppy or anything like that. The SIG, so I'll tell you my two favorites, then I'll tell you which one I'd rank last. So I like this one for how smooth it is. I like the SIG Cross for how fast it is. That short bolt throw, I can just run that very, very fast. And it's very reliable. Both of these, no issues with the SIG Cross or the Springfield Armory in terms of ejecting spent casings or ejecting live rounds, any of that kind of stuff, or feeding or any of that. They run buttery smooth, both of them. I would just say that this one's a little smoother than the SIG, and the SIG's a little bit faster than the Springfield Armory. So these two, I would say they're a tie for position number one, because they each do one thing better than the other one, and they're still very serviceable and very reliable, and they're great actions. This Christensen Arms action, I have seen a lot of problems with these. I've seen issues with bolt timing on these. I've seen issues where they won't reliably extract or eject live casings. In my particular case, I still own 4 Christensen Arms modern precision rifles, 1 in 300 Win Mag, 1 in 6.5 PRC, and 2 in 6.5 Creedmoor. Of those 4 rifles, 3 of those rifles have had issues related to the actions. Both of my Christensen Arms will not reliably eject, my 6.5 Creedmoors will not reliably eject live ammunition. So that's going to get rectified soon. I suspect it's probably just the extractor does not have a substantial enough spring, or the ejector doesn't, one of the two, or maybe both. So that's going to get rectified, and in my experience, Christensen Arms will always end up taking care of things until eventually you have what you should have had in the first place. The other issue that I have seen on these besides that is the bolt timing thing, and I had that with my 300 Win Mag. So I haven't had any issues with the 6.5 PRC that I have so far, other than Magpul PMags are not long enough to allow 6.5 PRC ammunition loaded to factory specs. So you get an accurate mag or something else in order to actually fit factory ammunition to the 6.5 PRC, so I'm not a huge fan of that. Anyway, these are sloppier actions, they are grittier actions, and they are not as smooth and they are not as reliable as the SIG or the Springfield Armory. So the way I would rank these actions, these two are tied for number one. These two I've seen quite a few issues with. So stock/chassis, because we have a stock here and then we have chassis on these systems. Some people wouldn't even call this a chassis because of the SIG's design, but I'm not going to go into much detail about that. But I will simply tell you that the chassis or stock that I prefer out of the 3 of these is actually the Christensen Arms. Even though the SIG Cross has toolless adjustment and it has a little bit more adjustment because of the way you can adjust the butt pad, the downside to the SIG Cross is there is wiggle in that butt pad, and there's a little bit of play in this folding mechanism. If you grab a hold of that and wiggle that when it's locked out, you'll get a little bit of wiggle in that. The MPR, you get most of the same adjustability minus that little adjustment in the buttstock, but it is rock solid when it is folded out. And when you fold it in, the way it folds in, it stays rock solid. It doesn't wiggle all over the place. So I prefer the adjustability on the modern precision rifle and how rock solid it is. The Springfield Armory is kind of like, if it fits you, great, and if it doesn't fit you, well, there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than, adjust the types of rings you're using and things like that, unless you buy the model with the adjustable cheek piece. If you want to adjust the length of pull, you're out of luck, any of that kind of stuff. So I do like this stock for a rifle stock, But once I started getting into using chassis that I could adjust to fit my face and length of pull that I want perfectly, I've pretty much never looked back. So I'd say this is number 1, SIG Cross number 2, and the Springfield Waypoint number 3 in the chassis/stock department. The one caveat to that I will add is if you want something that is the most reliable design, meaning the fewest screws and parts and things that could fall apart or go wrong, you cannot beat a traditional rifle stock for that type of an application. And some people may be really big fans of that. As long as you Loctite things down and stuff like that, I have never really had any screws or anything fall out of any of my chassis when I was in the field. But just be aware of that. A traditional rifle stock has way fewer moving parts or things to go wrong with it. So this is the more robust option of the 3. Okay, let's see here. Included muzzle device. The muzzle devices that are on these are from Huxworks. These are not the factory muzzle devices. What the factory muzzle devices that are included with these, I'm going to start off with the best one, which is the Christensen Arms, which it comes with a 4-chamber cowl induction style tunable muzzle brake. And when I say tunable, there's screws in the top of it so that you can take those out and adjust how much gas you want to be vented upward that will help balance or keep the muzzle down so that it recoils straight back. Also, the 4-chamber brake has the openings on the brake only on the sides, not on the bottom. Anybody who's done much shooting in the prone with a precision rifle or any type of a rifle with a muzzle brake knows that the last thing that you want is a muzzle brake that is exhausting or venting gas downward like a radial brake when you're shooting in the prone, because it just makes a dusty mess. It spits up dirt all over in your face every time you fire. On a more serious note, it reveals your position. If you were actually out in an area where there's going to be any dust or anything like that, you do that and all of a sudden you got this big mess of dust that kicks up. That's a no-go. Now, muzzle brakes in general in that situation probably wouldn't be the best. That's why you put a suppressor on and then that will solve that. But the Christensen Arms comes with the most effective muzzle brake and the best design muzzle brake of the 3. The Springfield Waypoint comes with a radial muzzle brake, in my opinion. It's good at reducing recoil, terrible for shooting in the prone. I would take it off personally and put on a traditional style muzzle brake or put on a muzzle device like these that is designed to be used with the suppressor or something. The muzzle brake that comes on this basically throw away for me personally, in the way I would use it. The SIG Cross comes with a thread protector and is threaded for a muzzle device but does not include one. So there you go, as far as the muzzle devices they come with. Now, aesthetics of these rifles. This is very subjective. Some of you may like the traditional look. Some of you may even like the traditional look so much that you might take something like this Springfield, and there are offerings out there that will allow this to be flush fit magazine, so you don't even have the magazine sticking out of it, which makes the rifle look even cleaner than the way it looks with a magazine. Any of these magazines can take these Magpul pattern AICS magazines or any other AICS short action pattern magazine. And you can use 5-round or 10-round magazines. This looks pretty goofy with the 10-round magazine. Anyway, aesthetics, this is subjective. I'm aware of that. I'm just going to tell you which one I like the look of the best. You guys can look at them for yourselves and decide what you like the best. But I like the look of the Christensen Arms Modern Precision Rifle the best of these 3. So that's my personal preference. After that, I would say probably the SIG Cross and then the Springfield Waypoint. And that's just because I'm a fan of the foldable chassis and the chassis look and design and all that kind of stuff. But that's just personal preference. Now, price. At the time I'm making this video, the Springfield Waypoint in this particular configuration is around $1,850 to $2,100. With that means it's got the carbon barrel, carbon stock, non-adjustable cheek piece. This specific configuration, last time I checked, you can pick them up for around that price range if you shop around, or within that price range, $1,850 to $2,100. Christensen Arms MPR, this model with the 22-inch barrel, in 6.5 Creedmoor, you can get some in different chamberings that are cheaper and some that are more expensive. But anyway, its price range is $1,750 to $2,200. And the SIG Cross in this particular configuration is $1,500 to $1,700. Now, if you shop around, you can get much better prices than what it is that I just gave you. In fact, I picked up the SIG Cross with a rangefinder and a SIG rifle scope for like $1,500–$1,600. I didn't need the rangefinder or the rifle scope. I sold both of those components, and I ended up with this rifle for under $1,000, maybe $950, $975 by the time I sold off those parts of that package I didn't need. So that was a really good deal they had going on at the time. I think most people didn't even know what it was. I'm not even sure if the distributor that was selling them knew exactly what they were doing at the time, but nevertheless, you can find them for cheaper if you shop around. You can also find them used for cheaper. If you find somebody that says, oh yeah, I put 50 rounds through the thing, that's basically a brand new gun. I wouldn't hesitate to buy a gun with, really low round count. So be aware of that as well. The Christensen arms, to give you an idea, price range, what I've experienced when they first came out, I paid quite a lot for my 300 Win Mag. It was like $2,300, I think. The MSRP was like $24. And then the first 22-inch barreled 6.5 Creedmoor I bought was like $2,100 to maybe $1,900 in that range. The next one I bought was like $1,500 or $1,600. Then the PRC I just bought, I paid $1,200 for, and I think it had like 28 rounds through it or something. I bought it used. So you can find some really good deals on these if you shop around. Christensen Arms usually has at least one time a year before hunting season that they'll do a promotion. Last year they were giving away like $600 worth of free stuff on the website as part of a rebate program if you bought any of their MPRs. So if you got a good deal on an MPR plus that stuff, sell off the stuff, keep the gun. So there are ways of getting good deals. The Springfield Waypoint 2020, I paid $1,600 for it with a first focal plane Vortex Strike Fire rifle scope and a bunch of other extra stuff, ammunition, bunch of stuff. I figure by the time I sell off all the components, I'll have around $1,000 into this rifle. So if you're just patient and shop around and you're not crazy, I'd recommend to people, don't just rush out and buy something and pay full price all the time unless you're sure you're going to love it and you're going to keep it forever. One of the things that's great, if you can find a pretty good price on a rifle, like some of the prices I found on these, is there's very little risk if you don't like them because you can always sell them and pretty much guarantee you're going to get your money back because you got a good deal in the first place. But anyway, so yeah, that's what you're looking at prices if you're buying them brand new and just shopping on the internet. In summary, I consider the SIG Cross a handy hunting rifle with a nice compact length. It is a great suppressor host. It has a phenomenal fast tri-lug action. It has a little wiggle in the chassis that I talked about. It is not as accurate as these other two rifles, but it still shoots pretty good. I think it's a great rifle. The Christensen Arms MPR has a lot of potential when you get one that is built properly. They are great rifles, probably my favorite of these three rifles when they're actually built properly and run properly. With that said, I cannot in good conscience recommend the Christensen Arms anything right now. And the reason for that is I already mentioned of the 4 MPRs that I've owned, 3 of them have had pretty substantial problems. One of them had a substantial enough problem it had to go back to the factory 2 times. I also have purchased 2 Christensen Arm Ranger 22s. One of them had to go back once. The other one has already been back once and they didn't fix it, so it's going back again. And if it comes back and I'm still having issues with it, I'll just list the issues that it has and sell it at a loss because I'm not in good conscience going to pass that problem on to somebody else. So Christensen Arms, if I had to kind of surmise what my experience has been with them, it is that they're a company with phenomenal designs, great engineering, great materials, great customer service, but horrible quality control. And so if you are willing to deal with the headache and you don't mind sending the rifle back and all that kind of stuff, my experience has been that eventually they're going to make sure that you have a rifle that shoots and a rifle that runs reliably. But as I mentioned to you, 6 rifles that I've owned of theirs, all but one have had to go back. That is horrendous quality control any way you look at it. So if you don't want to deal with the headache, just stay away from them. If you don't mind dealing with the headache, or if you find somebody else that didn't want to deal with the headache and you can pick one up for really cheap, then great. Then you can sort out the issues and you'll have a great rifle, at a great price. Springfield Waypoint is a solid rifle with no identifiable flaws that I have seen. It works and functions exactly the way that it is supposed to. There are a few things about it that I personally don't care for in terms of my personal taste. As I mentioned, the curved trigger instead of a flat face trigger. I would prefer a little bit lighter weight trigger. The adjustability of a chassis versus a stock, things like that. But that's not something that is an inherent flaw in manufacturing, an inherent flaw of quality control. Those are just personal preference. And so from an objective critic perspective, this rifle is essentially flawless, has been my experience with it. Okay, so I think it's a phenomenal rifle and great quality control from Springfield. Now, recommendations. This is what I'd like to conclude with. If you want the handiest and fastest action of the group with great toolless adjustment, by the SIG. If you want better accuracy and more of a precision rifle-oriented type rifle, then these two rifles would be better suited for that application. But specifically, if you want superb accuracy, the smoothest action, up there in terms of weight, or I should say down there in terms of weight, really lightweight gun along with the SIG Cross, and the most robust in terms of less components, less things to go wrong with it, then buy the Springfield Armory. If you want a superbly accurate rifle with the amenities of a chassis and a sensational trigger, or if you want an abusive relationship, buy the Christensen Arms Modern Precision Rifle. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those in the comments section below. If you found this review helpful, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe and like and share this video. That certainly helps us out and helps us produce more content. If you have different experiences that you would like to share with the community about these rifles, feel free to leave those in the comments section below. Thanks for watching the video. Have a nice day.